All right, so today we're diving into something that's really changing how we think about getting from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Electric vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
EVs,
Mm-hmm.
and their role in making transportation a whole lot more sustainable.
For sure.
We've got this in-depth report from CMR. It's called Driving Change: How Electric Vehicles Are Redefining the Future of Sustainable Mobility.
Interesting.
And it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So consider this deep dive, like our way of cutting through all the noise and
Yeah.
giving you the core insights
Exactly.
about the EV revolution.
Absolutely.
We want to look at what's working, what's still a bit of a question mark,
Yeah.
and kind of unpack the whole thing.
Yeah, I think this report goes beyond, the hype
Right.
and digs into the actual challenges that
Mm.
are, preventing EVs from being everywhere,
Sure.
but also the strategies that are being developed to overcome those challenges
Yeah.
and make EVs a true reality for the vast majority of people.
Right. And that's really what we want to highlight for you guys listening. Like, what are the most important things to take away from this so you can understand where the market is now
Yeah,
and where it's headed?
exactly.
Okay, so the report kicks off by stating a problem that we're all pretty familiar with.
Okay.
The way most of us get around right now, it relies heavily on burning fossil fuels.
Right.
And that, of course, is a massive contributor to climate change,
Absolutely.
air pollution.
For sure.
And let's not forget those soul-crushing traffic jams.
Yeah, that's the daily struggle right there.
I know.
Yeah.
Plus, depending on resources that are finite
Hmm.
and becoming increasingly expensive,
Yeah.
that's not exactly a recipe for a sustainable future.
Not at all.
So it's not surprising that there's this growing demand for greener alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it everywhere.
Right.
The report emphasizes how both governments and everyday people are pushing for cleaner options.
Totally.
So you've got this kind of dual pressure from
Yeah.
the top down and from the bottom up, which
Yeah.
is really interesting. And it makes sense that electric vehicles have become a front runner in this whole sustainable transportation movement.
Absolutely. But I think anyone who's even, thought about getting an EV knows
Yeah.
it's not exactly a seamless transition.
Right. It's not like just switching from, one gas station to another.
Exactly.
There are some real hurdles there.
And the report immediately acknowledges that
Yeah.
there are these real-world obstacles that are slowing down mass adoption.
Yeah.
So,
Like what specifically are we talking about?
well, for starters, there's the elephant in the room,
Okay.
the price tag.
Yeah, that upfront cost can be daunting for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Mm.
EVs tend to have a higher initial cost than comparable gasoline-powered cars.
Right.
And that's a big barrier for a lot of folks.
For sure.
Then there's the whole charging situation,
Yes. Range anxiety.
the dreaded range anxiety.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's like, will I be able to find a charging station when I need one?
Mhm.
Will it take forever to charge? Can I even make it to my destination without getting stranded?
Right.
It's those cautions and concerns that linger in people's minds.
For sure.
But then
And then, of course, there's still that, I think maybe skepticism is a strong word, but there are questions about
yeah, it's a hesitancy.
hesitancy,
Yeah.
about the reliability of EVs, how
Yeah.
dependable they are
Yeah.
compared to, the tried and true gasoline engine.
Right. The technology that we've all been using for decades.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are all very legitimate concerns.
Absolutely.
And the report makes it clear that
Mhm.
addressing these practical issues
Yeah.
is key
It's fundamental.
to making this whole transition to EVs a success.
Yeah. It's not just about making a cool new electric car.
Right.
It's about making sure that car fits into people's lives
Exactly.
in a practical and seamless way.
And on that note,
Yeah.
to kind of understand why this is all such a big deal,
Okay.
let's look at the market size for a second.
Right.
The report states that in 2024,
The electric vehicles market is valued at a massive $1.21 trillion US dollars.
oh, that's huge.
It's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and it's projected to reach $3.15 trillion by 2030.
Okay, so more than double.
More than double in just 6 years.
That's a pretty steep trajectory.
It is, growing at an annual rate of over 17%.
That's not just growth, that's like an explosion.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And I think it really signals this fundamental shift
Yeah.
that's happening in the automotive landscape.
And beyond.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't just about cars. It's
Yeah.
about batteries, charging infrastructure.
Jobs.
Jobs, exactly.
Entire new industries pumping up.
It's a whole ecosystem that's emerging around this transition.
It really is.
And I think that's why it's so important to understand it now. It's
Yeah.
not just an environmental imperative.
Right.
It's a massive economic transformation that's already happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate this transformation?
Right.
Well, the report dives into a comprehensive strategy
Okay.
that was developed with a major automotive company
Interesting.
to address these very challenges that we're talking about.
So it's not just theory.
No,
This is actual real-world application.
this is them putting it into practice.
Right.
And it's really a multifaceted approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about, designing fancy new electric cars.
Right.
It's looking at the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, that's what I found so interesting about this report,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's not just focusing on one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
It's looking at the entire picture,
Exactly.
all the different elements that need to come together
Yeah.
for EVs to really succeed.
Absolutely. So first off, they focused on developing new EV models.
Okay, makes sense.
But it wasn't just about aesthetics or, adding a few bells and whistles.
So what were they prioritizing?
They were laser focused on a few key areas,
Okay.
extending the range.
So how far these vehicles could travel on a single charge,
Exactly.
that addresses the range anxiety issue head on.
Big time.
Yeah.
Because that's a major concern for a lot of people if they're thinking about switching to an EV.
Absolutely.
They also really honed in on improving energy efficiency.
Okay, so making them more efficient?
Yeah, getting more mileage
Mm-hmm.
out of the same amount of electricity.
Right, so you can go further on the same charge.
Exactly.
And that impacts not just range, but also running costs.
Absolutely. And then crucially, they've focused on reducing charging times.
Yeah, because nobody wants to be waiting around for hours
No.
for their car to charge.
Especially if you're used to, filling up your gas tank in 5 minutes.
Exactly.
So these are all directly addressing those consumer worries
yeah.
about reliability and convenience.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can make an EV that goes further, charges faster,
Yeah.
and is just as reliable as a gas car,
Yeah,
that removes a lot of the barriers.
exactly. Then we get to the really essential piece of the puzzle,
Okay.
charging infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's absolutely crucial to improve the availability of charging stations and to work with companies that provide renewable energy.
Right, because it doesn't really help to have an electric car if you can't charge it easily.
Exactly.
And the environmental benefits are kind of negated if the electricity is coming from fossil fuels anyway.
You're just shifting the problem
Yeah, exactly.
from the tailpipe to the power plant.
Right.
So these collaborations with renewable energy providers,
Mhm.
they're not just beneficial, they're essential
I completely agree.
to making this whole EV ecosystem truly sustainable.
Yeah, it's about connecting those dots.
Absolutely. And government support. That
Yeah.
plays a massive role as well.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, this strategy really emphasizes the need to get governments on board through things like subsidies.
Okay, so financial incentives for people who buy EVs makes them more affordable.
Exactly. Tax breaks, policy frameworks that support both consumers and the companies manufacturing these vehicles.
Right, so creating a whole environment that encourages EV adoption.
Absolutely. And they even give a concrete example in the report.
Oh, really?
They talk about how France, in May of 2023,
Okay.
offered a €5,000 subsidy.
Wow, that's significant.
It is, for EVs priced under €47,000.
That's a pretty big chunk of change.
It is.
Yeah.
And you can see how these kinds of initiatives
Yeah,
can really jumpstart the market
absolutely.
by making EVs more financially accessible.
It's about lowering that barrier to entry,
Right.
especially in those early stages when EVs are still relatively new
Yeah.
and maybe a bit more expensive.
And it's not just about individual consumers.
Right.
These subsidies can also be seen as a way of accounting for the broader societal benefits.
Yeah, like cleaner air,
Exactly.
reduced healthcare costs.
Reduce dependence on foreign oil.
All of those positive externalities.
Right. So it's kind of like an investment
Yeah,
in a cleaner, healthier future.
I like that way of framing it.
Yeah,
It's an investment.
it is. And it wasn't just about government backing. The strategy also highlighted the importance of forming strategic partnerships with energy companies.
That makes sense.
This is key
Mm-hmm.
to expanding the physical presence of charging stations.
Right. So making sure there are enough places to charge,
Exactly.
especially in areas that might be overlooked,
Yeah.
like rural communities or smaller towns.
You can't just focus on the big cities.
Right.
You need to make sure that everyone
Yeah.
has access to this technology.
And that's where those energy companies come in.
Yeah.
They have the expertise. They have the
Yeah.
infrastructure
They have the reach
to make that happen.
to make that widespread expansion a reality.
Yeah, and alleviate that range anxiety.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the heart of these vehicles,
Okay.
the batteries.
Yeah, the power source.
The report delves into the integration of advanced battery technologies
Mm-hmm.
with two main goals in mind.
Okay.
One, enhancing performance.
So making EVs go further,
Yeah,
faster.
potentially accelerate faster.
Right.
And two, driving down costs.
Yeah. That's the holy grail right there.
It is. So they specifically mention lithium-ion batteries.
That's the current standard.
Yeah. And the really exciting potential of upcoming solid-state batteries.
Ah, yeah, I've heard about those. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be a game changer.
They hold a lot of promise.
Mm-hmm.
Researchers are really exploring them for their potential to offer greater energy storage
Okay.
in a smaller space.
Mm-hmm. So higher energy density.
Yeah. Faster charging times,
Even better.
longer lifespans,
Wow.
and hopefully lower manufacturing costs.
That's a lot of potential.
It is. And it's needed because lithium-ion batteries, while effective,
Yeah.
they do have those limitations in terms of how much energy they can store.
Right, for their size.
Yeah.
They're kind of bulky
Yeah.
and heavy.
So solid-state batteries,
Yeah.
they aim to overcome this by replacing the liquid electrolyte
Okay.
found in lithium-ion batteries
Mm-hmm.
with a solid one,
Interesting.
which could lead to safer,
Mm-hmm.
more energy-dense batteries.
And potentially cheaper to produce.
That's the hope.
Yeah, that's exciting.
It is.
It's like the next generation
Mhm.
of battery tech.
It really is.
And it could have huge implications for EVs.
Absolutely.
Right.
But it's not just about having the best technology.
Right.
People need to understand its benefits.
Yeah, they need to be convinced
Yeah.
that EVs are a good choice.
So a big part of this strategy was a targeted consumer outreach campaign.
Okay. So educating the public.
Exactly. The goal was to really educate people
Mm-hmm.
about the long-term cost savings of owning an EV.
So factoring in things like lower fuel costs
Yeah.
and maintenance costs,
Less maintenance.
because EVs generally require less maintenance.
They do. They were also highlighting the positive environmental impact.
Right. Appealing to those eco-conscious consumers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And showcasing the improvements in reliability
Hmm.
and convenience.
Because those are still big concerns for a lot of people.
They are. So it was about addressing those misconceptions head on and building trust in the technology.
Yeah, because if people don't trust it,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to buy it.
They're not going to buy it.
So education is key.
Education is absolutely key. And they didn't just stop there.
Okay.
They thought about the bigger picture.
Right.
They collaborated with urban planners
Mm-hmm.
and infrastructure developers
Makes sense.
to figure out how to best integrate EV infrastructure into our cities and towns.
Yeah, so it's not just about the car itself.
Well,
It's about the whole ecosystem.
about making it easy to live with an EV,
Yeah.
to charge it,
Mhm.
to travel longer distances.
You make it a seamless part of your life.
Exactly.
That's smart.
And to really emphasize the environmental benefits,
Yeah,
they formed partnerships with renewable energy providers.
of course.
So it's like a full circle kind of thing.
It completes the picture.
It's not just that the cars themselves are cleaner,
Right.
but the energy powering them is also increasingly green.
It's a holistic approach to sustainability.
It really is. Now, this wasn't just some random strategy
Okay.
they threw together.
So there was research behind it?
There was a lot of research.
All right, I like that.
It was built on a solid foundation of research.
Good.
So the report highlights several key areas of research.
Okay.
First, they did a thorough market analysis.
Makes sense.
They looked at, where EV adoption was most likely to take off based on things like population density,
Mm-hmm.
local environmental regulations,
Right.
the presence of early adopters.
Yeah, where those innovators are concentrated.
Exactly.
Yes.
They also looked at what consumers cared about most
Okay.
in terms of cost driving range,
Mm-hmm.
environmental impact.
So understanding those consumer preferences
Yeah,
is crucial.
absolutely. And of course, they kept a close eye on the competition.
Right.
What were other car companies doing
Yeah.
in terms of their EV designs,
Mhm.
their pricing strategies,
Right.
their infrastructure investments?
So it's not just about understanding your own strengths and weaknesses.
No,
It's about knowing what everyone else is doing.
exactly. You got to keep an eye on the playing field.
The competitive landscape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this market analysis gave them really valuable insights
Yeah.
into what consumers were looking for
Mm-hmm.
and how they could best position their new EV models.
Makes sense.
Then there was a deep dive into the technology,
Okay.
a real technical assessment.
So getting into the nitty-gritty
Yeah.
of the actual EVs.
They looked at all aspects of EV technology
Mm-hmm.
with a particular focus on batteries,
Okay.
both the current lithium-ion batteries
Right.
and those exciting developments in solid-state batteries.
Yeah. I mean, that's the future right there.
It's where a lot of the innovation is happening.
Yeah.
And they looked at everything.
Mm-hmm.
How much energy these batteries could store,
Right.
how quickly they could be charged, their lifespan,
Yeah.
how much they cost to manufacture.
All the key metrics
But then
that determine the performance and the affordability of an EV.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
They also examined advancements in charging infrastructure,
Okay.
things like faster charging stations and even wireless charging.
Ooh, that's futuristic.
It is.
I mean, imagine just parking your car and it starts charging automatically.
It would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be so convenient.
It would change the game.
For sure.
And they didn't just focus on the tech itself.
Okay.
They also engaged with stakeholders.
So getting input from different groups,
Yeah.
people who have a vested interest in the success of EVs.
Exactly. So they talked to policymakers.
Do you advocate for those supportive regulations we talked about earlier?
Right. Tax credits, subsidies.
What was that?
They consulted with industry experts
Okay.
to gain valuable insights.
Hmm.
They collaborated with energy providers
Right.
to ensure a sustainable and clean electricity supply.
Yeah, you got to make sure the grid can handle all these EVs.
Exactly. And they worked with urban planners and local authorities
Okay.
to figure out the best ways to integrate charging stations into our communities.
That's really smart.
It is.
Because it's not just about having charging stations. It's about having them in the right places.
Exactly.
Where people need them.
Where they make sense.
Yeah, and where they're convenient to use.
Absolutely. And a really important part of their research was consumer surveys.
Okay, so going straight to the source,
Yeah,
the people who will ultimately be driving these EVs.
exactly. They wanted to understand what people's concerns were
Okay.
about things like affordability, range anxiety, the convenience of charging,
Mm-hmm.
and how important the environmental benefits were to them.
So getting a sense of their priorities.
Yeah. And this feedback helped them identify the main obstacles,
Okay.
preventing people from switching to EVs.
Like what?
Well, things like cost,
Right.
charging availability,
Mm-hmm.
concerns about battery longevity.
Yeah, how long the battery will last.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it also helped them understand what features people really valued,
Okay.
like energy efficiency,
Mm.
attractive design,
Yeah.
reliable after-sales support.
So understanding both the barriers and the motivators.
Right.
That's key.
Absolutely. And then finally, they conducted pilot programs.
Oh, interesting.
This is where they put everything to the test
Okay.
in the real world.
So kind of like a beta test
Yeah.
before the full launch?
Exactly. They deployed their EV models
Mm-hmm.
and charging infrastructure in select areas
Okay.
and observed how people actually use them.
So seeing how it all works in practice.
Yeah.
Not just in theory.
Exactly. And this gave them invaluable data
Okay.
on how the vehicles performed.
Under real-world conditions.
Yeah, day-to-day driving.
Yeah.
How efficient the charging network was
Mhm.
and what the overall experience was like for early adopters.
So identifying any kinks in the system
Yeah.
before they roll it out to everyone.
Right. So these pilot programs were crucial
Yeah.
for identifying and resolving any unexpected issues
Absolutely.
before a full-scale launch.
That's a really smart approach.
It is. So after all this research and the implementation of their strategy,
Mhm.
what were the results?
Yeah, what happened?
Well, the report paints a pretty optimistic picture.
Okay, good.
They saw some really significant outcomes.
Like what?
Well, first off,
Mhm.
they saw a massive increase
Okay.
in the adoption rate of electric vehicles.
So more people buying EVs.
Yeah, over 40% increase within their target regions.
Wow, that's impressive.
It's huge. And it happened in just 3 years.
That's a pretty rapid shift in consumer behavior.
It is. It shows that people are starting to embrace EVs
Yeah.
as a viable transportation option.
That's really encouraging.
It is. And it wasn't just an environmental win.
Okay.
It was a big boost for the company as well.
How so?
Their market share increased by 25%,
Wow.
positioning them as a real leader in the sustainable mobility space.
Well, they're really capitalizing on this growing market.
They are. They're at the forefront of this EV revolution.
Yeah, and that early mover advantage can be really powerful,
They can be huge.
especially in a market that's still evolving so rapidly.
Absolutely. Their new EV model,
Yeah,
it exceeded their sales expectations.
good for them.
It did, which led to strong revenue growth and really validated all their investments in R&D.
Right, because developing a new car is not cheap.
No, it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
So to see that success,
Mm-hmm.
to see those sales numbers, it's a real confirmation that they're on the right track.
Absolutely.
And this success has given them a really strong foundation
Wow.
to continue developing new products
Mm-hmm.
and expand further into the green mobility sector.
So it's not just about this one car.
Yeah.
It's about building a sustainable future for their entire
Yeah,
business.
exactly. And their commitment to sustainability
Yeah,
has really enhanced their brand image.
that's important these days.
It's huge.
Consumers are more and more conscious
Yeah.
of the environmental and social impact of the companies they support.
Absolutely. They're now seen as a leader in environmentally responsible transportation.
Which is a great position to be in.
It is. It attracts eco-conscious consumers,
Yeah.
investors. It can even lead to new business partnerships.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
It is.
Yeah.
They've also developed a really comprehensive EV ecosystem
Okay.
that goes beyond just the vehicles themselves.
So what does that include?
It includes the charging infrastructure,
Right.
customer support, the overall ownership experience.
So it's about making sure that everything around the car
Yeah,
is just as good as the car itself.
exactly.
So that people have a positive experience with EVs.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that ensures their long-term viability in a future that is increasingly focused on green technologies.
Makes sense.
And, of course, the collaborations they built with governments
Yeah.
and the resulting incentives and supportive policies, that's created a much more favorable regulatory environment,
Absolutely.
making it easier for both them and consumers
Yeah.
to embrace EVs.
And ultimately accelerating the growth of the market.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the CMR report,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways for you, our listener?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the shift towards electric vehicles, it's a complex but absolutely essential transition.
Yeah,
If we want to achieve truly sustainable transportation,
agreed.
it requires a coordinated effort, a
Absolutely.
holistic approach
Yeah.
that involves technological innovation, infrastructure development.
Policy changes, consumer education.
It's all connected.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what I found encouraging about this report is that it highlights how those common challenges we hear about, the
Yeah.
higher upfront costs, the limited charging infrastructure,
Right.
those consumer concerns about range and reliability,
Yeah.
those are being actively addressed
Yeah.
through these innovative solutions and strategic partnerships.
Right.
And we're already seeing positive results.
Yeah, those pilot programs are showing real promise.
They are. And the projections for market growth,
Yeah.
they're significant.
It's clear that EVs are gaining momentum
They are.
and that this transition is well underway.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the direct impacts of EVs,
Yeah.
the environmental benefits,
Yeah.
the economic benefits, but think about the wider ripple effects
Okay.
this transportation revolution could have,
Yeah.
what other industries might be reshaped
Right.
by a future dominated by electric vehicles.
It's like a domino effect.
It is.
One change leads to another,
Yeah.
and those changes can spread throughout the entire system.
Exactly. What aspects of our daily lives
Yeah.
might be fundamentally altered?
It's exciting to think about.
It is.
Yeah, just-
It really makes you appreciate how interconnected
Yeah.
everything is.
Yeah.
Sustainability and technological progress.
They're not separate things.
No,
They're intertwined.
absolutely. And as we move towards a more sustainable future, technology is going to play a crucial role.
I think so, too.
And it's not just about EVs. It's about all kinds of innovations
Yeah.
that can help us reduce our impact on the planet.
And create a better future for everyone.
Absolutely. So keep thinking about those connections,
Yeah.
those ripple effects, and how even small changes
Yeah.
can lead to big transformations.
Like a powerful idea
It is.
that even our individual choices
Yeah.
can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.